This is Kim Paffenroth, author of Gospel of the Living Dead, and you are listening to The Graveyard Show.
Welcome to The Graveyard.
And you are listening to the Graveyard Show podcast, and I am your caretaker, and the graveyard is open. Welcome back, everyone. Part 2 of 3 of my interview with author Kim Paffenroth. He wrote a book called Gospel of the Living Dead, George Romero's Vision of Hell on Earth. And on this interview that I have with Kim, we are going to get into the meat of the matter. We will be discussing the 2 films, Night of the Living Dead, followed by, of course, Dawn of the Dead. And we're going to get into a lot. We're going to talk about the characters. We're going to talk about what Romero was saying in his films, that kind of stuff. Now, I realize that maybe for some of you, you may not be familiar with the term film critic or movie critic. I think many people tend to confuse that with movie reviewer. And I'm not going to get film snobby here. I don't like film snobs. There is, though, a difference between the two. So when you go to Rotten Tomatoes and you take a look and see, any new movies that are coming out and you want to see what the movie reviewers are saying, well, that's what they are. They're movie reviewers. They go, they see the movie, they tell you if it's good, if it's not good, if they liked it, if they didn't like it, that kind of stuff. And they'll give you their score, 2 out of 4 stars, 3 out of 5, 5 out of 5, whatever. So a film critic or a movie critic will then look at a movie, they'll take a movie and they will dissect the film, and they will look at the themes that are being discussed in a movie, or they may look at a topic that's being discussed. So for Night of the Living Dead, we'll discuss race, as well as in Dawn of the Dead, we'll talk about consumerism. So those are themes that come up quite a bit in those movies. And we're going to get into a lot of other things as well, including Barbara as the female lead in Night and Fran as the female lead in Dawn. Are there similarities? What are the differences? That kind of stuff. So that's what the difference is between a movie reviewer and a movie critic. So I will, again, forewarn everyone, disclaimer/spoiler alert. The movies will be discussed in great detail. So if you have not seen one or both, please know that these movies are going to be discussed in their entirety, and you have been warned. If you would like to see the movies first, please, by all means, go, take a look, and then come on back. The podcast will still be here, man. I don't know why I did that, but hey, why not? Okay, so let's get right to it. Part 2, Kim Paffenroth. It's time to talk about more zombies and a little production value from me. Oh, I know, it's some good stuff. Okay, let's go back and, there he is, my trusty werewolf. I can always rely on Lawrence. He's giving me the side eye because he knows once again I've been yammering and taking up too much time, so let's get right to it. Lawrence is going to take you deep into the Graveyard Show archives, where we will revisit my interview with Kim Paffenroth. We will discuss Night and Dawn. The time, July 30th, 2009, and the place, Graveyard Show podcast number 31. I will see you right here when you return. Safe travels. Second part of our interview about zombies. Why don't we talk about what we learned from the first part of our interview with Kim Paffenroth, right? So, what is a smart zombie? Anybody? Okay. Yes. No. Oh. Hello, everybody. Don't mind the zombies. You're totally and completely safe here in the graveyard. Trust me. We were just killing some time until your return. And now that you are back after a week, well, we can continue our conversation that I started last week with author Kim Paffenroth. All right, quiet down over there. I'm trying to talk to the audience. Thank you. Sorry about that. But it's time to pick up my conversation with author Kim Paffenroth. Time to talk zombies. And as you can hear, there is no grave being dug because, well, we did one last week, but we didn't finish the interview. So, it's my pleasure and an honor to welcome back Kim Paffenroth as we talk George Romero and zombies. It's time for Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. Enjoy. Kim Paffenroth, the Associate Professor of Religious Studies at Iona College in New York, rejoins me. And more importantly, he is the author of the book that we've been talking about this last week, Gospel of the Living Dead, which takes a look at George Romero's visions of hell on earth through his films Night, all the way up to Land of the Dead. Now, I want to make a quick disclaimer. If you have not, for whatever reason, seen Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead, both the originals, and you don't want to find out what happens, maybe you want to come back at a later date. Otherwise, here we go. Kim, thanks for joining me again here in the graveyard.
Great to be back.
All right, well, let's get right into it. Night of the Living Dead. You talk about the infamous shocking ending and how really, after everything we had seen in this movie, the ending really still takes the cake. Can you get into that a little bit with us?
Well, it's because the other things we see in the movie are shocking, on a very visual level. And especially back then, my gosh, people weren't used to seeing, people eating entrails and gnawing on bones in the central scene, which is actually, it's over very quickly, but you can understand how at the time that would have been shocking. But what
sure.
I think,
yeah.
and it's interesting because, of course, that shock to an audience in 2009 seems rather tame, especially in black and white. It looks rather, subdued, or you're certainly used to seeing much more garish, clinical level dissection type blood and gore. But what I think remains shocking about the movie is the ending, because the ending is a narrative shock. It's a shock to how we think a story is supposed to be set up.
Sure.
And even if the hero dies at the end, whether it's in whatever I just saw Public Enemies, or whether it's going back to Bonnie and Clyde or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, whoever, right?
Yep.
If the hero dies at the end, that's one thing. But for him to die in this meaningless, random way, and without it being funny, as far as I can tell, right?
Sure, yeah.
The other way to handle it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it really does have that sort of. It would be very different if you did it in that sort of Monty Python-esque kind of way, where just a bus hits him at the end. And,
Yeah.
It's not that either. So, the randomness of it, I think, will always surprise us, even if the rest of the movie looks kind of rather tame by our standards.
And it is amazing because I could almost, it's strange because I'm thinking about it, and I've seen Night of the Living Dead, I mean, my fair share of times, and even in my college days, I wrote a paper on Night and on Dawn. So, I watched these films, enough. Certainly, my writing is nothing compared to your writing. So, this is more scholastic.
I'm sure it was great.
But I do remember the ending to Night of the Living Dead. Ben, I can almost see it shot by shot. Ben gets, comes out of the basement. He has the gun with him. He looks out the window. The posse's out there. And they see him, and they fire a shot, and it's not even like a slow motion. It's like, bang, dead. And then it's like, okay, let's round it up, fellas. And then we see Ben being burned with the rest of the zombies, and it is amazing how that does stay with you. It's very effective.
I think in a way, I suppose, inevitable and that's always that's a good thing about a shocking ending, is when you reflect back on it and it's sort of inevitable, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you read The Road when it came out.
No.
But I think the strength of that is that very gradually. When I first read the ending, and I won't give that one away. I should give spoilers to my own stuff, but not to somebody else's. When I read that, the ending didn't strike me as quite right, but it sort of sank in, and you were like, no, it kind of had to end that way. Given the kind of book, given the kind of worldview, given what this book was dealing with, that was kind of the only way it could go.
Yeah.
And I would say the same for Night. It really can't.
Yeah, you really can't go.
People can't skip off into the sunset, or again, they can't. I mean, what really happens throughout is that he can't die in a heroic manner because he's not a hero.
Yeah.
And I suppose right up to the end, we're always sort of hoping that he is. Okay, he shot Harry, but Harry's kind of a jerk anyway. So maybe we can kind of overlook that. And okay, he did try to defend the house and completely fail, but okay, maybe we can overlook that because there were kind of lots of zombies and stuff, and everybody else was screaming and yelling. So maybe we're still hoping for he can do something heroic, but it's like no, he really can't in this world. This isn't a world where that's possible.
And really, if you think, it's like, well, what other ending could there really be? I don't see Ben walking out of the house, joining the other men. I don't, and especially the way it's set up too. The obvious factor of racism is, and as you mentioned in your book, it's never discussed, and there's never any racial epithets thrown at each other. But there's something definitely underlying going on. Now, again, it could be that you look at the time that the movie was shot, or you because as you wrote, Harry, the character of Harry, is looked at as a racist, and the posse looks like a lynch mob, but it's never mentioned, it's never brought up. How effective Romero does that is really amazing.
And that's a huge debate in fandom. And again, as I said in the last show, it's where I'm not sure asking the people who participated in it is necessarily the best place to look for an answer, because the people who participated in the movie swear up and down that was not their intention. Mm-hmm. And I have to respect them, and I never said anywhere, I hope I never said anywhere in the book that was their intention, but the effect, what I try to keep saying is that the effect on the audience isn't to be completely just cast aside either.
Yeah.
As you say, if you look at, Ben's going to come skipping out of the house to this bunch of white guys who's having a hell of a lot of time shooting people, a hell of a lot of fun shooting people in the head.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound quite right. It doesn't feel quite right.
No.
Given how, again, you can't read their minds, but given the images that they are surrounded with, barking dogs.
Yep.
Sheriff, people with guns, not really under governmental control.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you can't really say shooting zombies, right? What are they shooting? They're shooting people who are staggering across the field, right? How careful are they about saying, "Oh, excuse me,"
Yeah.
Prove that you're alive, or prove that you're a human, or prove that you're not a zombie.
Sure.
And again, I think he ramps it up in Dawn of the Dead, where the National Guard and the rednecks there are much more clearly.
I was just thinking about that.
They're much more clearly depicted as just having a great time doing this, right?
Yeah.
It's like a cookout, right? They're just drinking beers and shooting people in the head, and it's like, wow, it's a hell of a weekend, I guess. By some definitions of fun.
Now, one of the things we just touched on a little bit, I'd like to get into as well, is, and I have to say this, Kim, and I don't say this because I have you on the show right now. Your book really made me think, and as I said, I've seen these films a lot, and you really do. That's
all we ask. People don't have to agree with us. They just have to think about what we're writing about.
And really, if listeners out there haven't read the book, you really do. Especially if you're a fan of these films, you really do need to get this book, and you really do need to read it. It really does. Kim, you do an effective way of really bringing about things that may be right in front of our faces, but we tend to maybe not see them. And one of the things that you mentioned is how, as we were just talking about, as Ben not being the hero, but you talk about how no one is really likable in the original Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
Can you get into that a little bit?
A little bit. I say that like it's very simple, but obviously it's a little more complex. But
I think it's caught me a little off guard there, but so I'll just start going. And I think it's sort of Romero's gift, or not quite gift. It's one of his returning themes, one of the themes he wants to return to.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it undoes him, and I think sometimes he overdoes it, and it makes the movie fall flat. So I would set Night and Diary at the two ends, where at the moment they are, until he adds another volume.
Yep.
I think Diary is so full of unlikable people that it's like, I don't really care what happens. It's like the zombies could break in and eat everybody at any moment, and I would laugh, because it's just like, I don't care. These people are all stupid.
Yep.
Now, I do see that very much as partly a reflection of Night, and I'm not sure I can put my finger necessarily on what cuts differently, but in Night, I see these very unlikable people thrown together, and somehow I want them to succeed.
Yep.
Is the difference. As I said a minute ago, I want Ben somehow to realize his heroism. I want Barbara to snap out of her coma or catatonia or whatever the hell it is, her zoned out state. I want Harry to stop being such a jerk. I want the young kid to, be more effective and not kind of bumble around. I'm sort of rooting for them. Now, again, I suppose what the challenge or what the detriment is with that setup of having a cast of unlikable characters is that it can tilt all the way to where you just don't root for them at all.
Mm-hmm.
It does seem to me in the central movies, Dawnland, Dawn Dayland, there are a lot of unlikable people there, but there's always somebody you can kind of focus on as having some admirable heroic qualities.
Sure.
So I think those perhaps narratively it's more of a balance. One reviewer said of my book that I'm obviously so in love with the original Dawn that my analysis sort of shows it, and so I might as well admit that here. I mean, I think the original Dawn of the Dead is sort of the ultimate zombie movie, maybe the ultimate horror movie for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that balance of having Roger and Steve, who are kind of, even they're not totally unlikable.
Yeah.
They're kind of brash and stupid. And then having the eminently likable Fran and Peter. I think that was a very workable and very compelling balance to strike in that.
And I also think that if we were characters in that movie and we came across them, that you would feel safe with them, that they would accept you. Maybe not openly.
That's a good point.
But you would.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that they would. They may be. They may not accept you immediately, but that in the end, I mean, and we'll get into this later, but certainly with the relationships that occur and how fast these bonds occur at Dawn. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that because, as far as your look at Dawn, because I agree. I think Dawn not only is the best of the bunch. It is, when you talk about great horror films, I don't know how you can't put that in it. I mean, on so many different levels. But again, we'll get into that a little bit later.
That's an excellent way to put the dynamic. Is how accepting would these characters be? How much is there any sense, even in this hellish world that they're in? How much is there any remnant of a sense of community?
Yeah.
And again, I know you want to kind of keep it to the Romero, but my book does include the Dawn remake.
Yep.
And I think that's a really beautiful element to that film, is how people struggle with accepting. I mean, there's a lot of tension in there.
Yeah.
But when people are accepted in the community, then, okay, now we have to pull together. We have to, we're in this together. And that is something that's a very good dynamic to point out, is completely lacking in Night, where people just don't seem to get along as soon as they meet each other.
Yeah, and you feel like you'd be playing referee in the room. Be like, stop arguing, stop fighting. Let's get stuff together. It would drive me nuts. I probably would just walk up to the zombies and say, guys, let's just get this over with, because I can't take it.
I suppose that is another measure of a movie, right? Is how much are you shouting at the screen? Stop that. And I think with Night you are. And of course with Diary you are, because it's like I don't know how many times I was wanting to shout, put down the camera.
Yeah.
She's being eaten alive. Put down the camera and help her.
Yeah.
And
what are you
so
doing?
you can imagine in that community, how would you join that community? They would just want to film you while you're being eaten.
Yeah. It's like, tell me your experience. What are you feeling right now?
What are you feeling? I'm kind of feeling bitten right now.
Yeah.
All blood is gushing out.
Yeah. I'd be like, I'm gonna tell you what you're gonna be feeling in a second when I get my hands on that camera.
That's kind of how it ends. Yeah, when she takes the camera away from him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how he's lived. So it's a terrible indictment of the media culture, but it's not much fun to watch, I don't think.
No. And when you talk about relationships in Night, you talk about how, and I believe that it was the only time where Romero had a married couple in his film, in Night, but yet they're unhappy. And then you have the young couple that you just mentioned. You want the kid to do something correct, and yet you have this young couple that are in love, but it's unstable, and they're kind of bumbling around. And then you also talk about family murdering family with Barbara's brother coming back and being the one to do her in at the end, and the little girl coming back and killing her mother, and certainly not for good things.
The girl.
Yes.
The lady who played the girl makes the rounds of cons, by the way.
Oh.
She'll sell you a signed trowel, by the way.
Really? I
Yes.
did not know that.
In case you want a trowel.
Well, you know what? You never know.
You might need one to stab your mother 7 times.
Yeah. I mean, talk about one of the more disturbing scenes in that film is.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like, man, whew, that is just right down there with. The daughter just stabbing her mother with this trowel, and it's done in quick cuts. Yeah, man, very effective. But certainly, Romero does say a lot about all generations in this film.
Yep.
And gets into it.
Well, again, I think that is his I guess it's his gift and his curse.
Mm-hmm.
Is and as my comments I think previously sort of lean towards, when he's making fun of American empire and making fun of it in this hideous, grotesque way, that we're parasitic, we're cannibalistic, we're ruining the world, and the world might rise up and eat us. It's an uncomfortable criticism, but it's one that I feel is fairly well placed.
Yeah.
And one that I feel a lot of sympathy with. But he does want to take it that next step to where, again, I don't know if I'm revealing myself as a Pollyanna or a milquetoast by saying, that's going too far, but he does want to expand that criticism to be every possible institution.
Yeah.
Now it's not. Now you're not just making fun of the government. Now you're making fun of family as an institution, romance as an institution. Every possible thing that we rely on to give our lives structure and meaning, I think comes under not just scrutiny, but complete attack in that movie. And it's effective as horror. I guess at some level I would have to say, how effective is this as social criticism? Because I can understand if you say, the United States has a lot of problems, and we're going down the wrong path. I can understand that as social criticism. If you say every human relationship is just shot and is just degraded and perverted and sick, then I'm not sure what you expect me to do other than just like kill myself or something.
Yeah.
If it's that bad.
Yeah.
But I do understand that as sort of the logical extreme, right? How much horror could you stand?
Yeah.
And if the members of your own family are going to kill you and eat you, that is kind of the ultimate horror. Now, in his defense, or where he's coming from with that, again, I think is that sense of ambivalence, and a lot of critics have pointed this out about the mother stabbing scene, is that is a basic psychological drive that we all have. We all do want to kill our parents at some point, and this movie just makes it concrete and horrifying and overt.
Well, that it definitely did, to say the least.
So it is responding to, again, it is responding to some primal, hideous, monstrous drive within people.
Now, you talk about how the sin that's portrayed in this film is gluttony. Can you talk about that a little bit? Obviously, we know that the zombies are eating, so no surprise there. But certainly,
well, I think it's a broader observation about how one might use the zombie as a symbol, right? And I would say if you're using the zombie as a symbol of sin, at the literal level, he's only going to work for gluttony, right? That's all he can do. Mm-hmm. He's not terribly conniving. He's not.
Yeah.
He certainly isn't. Again, unlike the vampire, he's not lustful at all. He's just not capable of much. So he's really only capable of the most basic physical sin that has to do with material, with stuff, with physical need. That's gluttony. So what I think the movie opens up in terms of the interactions between the people is this whole idea of how original sin, in the sense of everyone being fallen and selfish and looking out for themselves. So, I mean, some of the things that you said, some of the comments you made about how theoretically we should all band together in the situation, and yet here, not at all. That does come back to a view, I think, whether Romero would acknowledge it as he wouldn't, I don't think, acknowledge it as based on Christian ideas about original sin, but it does seem to fit with that. Mm-hmm. Is that as soon as sin comes into the picture, in the biblical interpretation or in the biblical depiction or in interpretations of it, the first thing that's fractured and sickened and perverted is human relations. People don't trust each other. Adam and Eve immediately begin fighting and arguing with each other, and immediately begin fighting and arguing with God. That seems to be perfectly played out in the house there. So all of this is to say that the zombies on their own really only depict a very basic physical kind of sense of sin, hunger, whereas the people represent a much more complicated, a much more mental image of sin as trying to exploit and use and get over on other people. I think that was the point I was trying to make at that point in the analysis.
Now, while Romero is making his criticisms on pretty much everything, he does include, and you note, I would say, you don't say it's subtle, but I would say it's subtle. When you see shots of newscasts, the camera's very stable, but yet everything else outside of that, introducing new characters of the zombies, the camera's unstable.
Yep. It's okay. So I mean, he's setting up there the criticism or the parody of media culture that he'll eventually come around to in a full-blown version, and maybe not totally effective version in Diary. But I think he lays a much more subtle subtext there in Night. That the camera crews and especially the interviews are in Washington, right?
Yeah.
Tell us, Senator, what's going on. Well, we've got everything under control.
Yep.
Like, yeah, right. It's this constant theme of the pictures on the talking idiot box in front of me are lying.
Yep.
And they bear very little resemblance and very little connection to what's going on outside the box. Right, so you're absolutely correct. I mean, it's some of the scenes there are so funny of how everybody's staring at the TV, right? Yeah. As though that's going to give them any information other than they could get from looking out the window, which is much more accurate and immediate and potentially fatal. Actually, looking at the TV is what's fatal, because it's telling you, go outside and try to get to the rescue station, and it's like, well, no, there is no rescue station. And again, that's made explicit at the beginning of Dawn. Right? Where people sent to the rescue station are specifically the ones who have been eaten, because there is no rescue station. So he is like I say, he's just a scamp, and making fun of people who hold cameras when that's what he does for a living Yes, he does. He does like that as well.
And
but of course, even more making fun of people who look at
sure
idiotic images.
Yeah, because it's like, hey, everybody, wait, something's on television. Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. It must be true.
Yeah, it's like, well, hey, everything's okay. Well, yeah, it's like you said. It's like, no, just look out the window.
Exactly. And actually, I suppose if we want to connect the dots closely enough, right? It's the television that tells them to go get help or go to the rescue station, which is what causes them to go outside, to go to the gas pump, to get the gas, to fill up the truck, which causes it to blow up, which kills 2 of them, which unravels the whole thing.
Oh, gosh. And, oh, my gosh. Now, it was so funny, one of the interesting tidbits, I mean, aside from everything else we just talked about, one of those, hey, moments that I had was, you mentioned what time of year Night of the Living Dead takes place, because...
Yeah, I was shocked.
Yeah, because...
I saw it in the production, in the analyses,
Because we naturally think, it's fall.
Yep.
And it's, obviously the movie's on at Halloween, and we think, oh, okay, not so much so as your research found out.
It wasn't so much the research. It was just really listening to the dialogue closely, and seeing how much it contrasts with the background. I mean, they're standing there in the cemetery, in front of completely bare trees, and she's talking about they just made the switch to daylight savings time, and I'm like, am I losing my mind? That happens in the spring. And so again, it's one of the funny things about low budget. They'd shot that at a particular time when they had access to to all the actors and to the house and everything.
Yeah. It is actually ironic, and I'm sure again Romero did this on purpose. But you're talking about springtime when things are blooming, and now you're talking about the beginning of the end.
The beginning of the end and death. Yep. Apparently the actors had to, breathe very shallowly and not exhale a lot when they talked, otherwise
you get the
breath.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, of course we could talk about Night of the Living Dead forever, but I would like to move on to Dawn, the original Dawn of the Dead. And you talk about in this film how materialism creates the monsters as opposed to the bite of the zombies. Can you get into that a little bit? Yeah,
and I really should have used consumerism throughout there, but I'll go ahead and swap those interchangeably.
Sure.
It is the scenes with the zombies in the mall, especially throughout, and especially then at the end when they actually win, when they get the prize, when they get what they and the humans both wanted so much, the mall, that is what makes that film so memorable. I mean, I know we talked about the elevator scene, and there certainly are some good moments of terror that stick out, and again, moments of gore too, with the whacking helicopter blade. We all remember that too. So there's plenty of that. But what really seems what it's amazing what has become part. If you ask people today, what is a zombie? Their associations are immediately going to be with malls. They're going to assume that zombies frequent malls. They're going to assume that, I think, much more than they're going to assume that zombies are the results of Haitian voodoo rituals, right? Which is where the whole thing comes from originally. So it's just amazing to me that Romero, as a storyteller, takes over the myth and defines it now. And when there are zombie walks and zombie marches, and you can go online and Google that and find out exactly how many there are, and there are plenty, right?
Yep.
They don't take place in cemeteries. They certainly don't take place just around, New Orleans or any place where voodoo is popular or interesting to people. They always take place at malls. So I think he has really, again, this goes back to some of our comments about how the zombies are us. He has made it horrifying.
Yeah. What
we have done to ourselves through this attempt to fill up our lives with empty stuff.
Yep.
And this goes back to your comments about the time period. I mean, sure, the time period was full of anxiety, it was full of fear. You didn't mention in that specific context, but we mentioned it before, nuclear war.
Yeah.
I actually, shortly after that, not right in 78, but in 81, we moved to Los Alamos. So I was at one of the prime targets, if there should be such an event. We took all that anxiety over all those things, which are not that dissimilar than our anxieties right now over bioterror or terrorism or engineered diseases that are going to take us over. We took all that anxiety and we went shopping because that could fill up our time and distract us.
Yep.
And he shows you, a bunch of these drooling morons, and that's all zombies really are finally, right?
Yep.
He showed you a bunch of drooling morons wandering around for the rest of, I guess, forever.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's totally unknown what the shelf life is of a zombie, but apparently they'll wander around for a long time, doing nothing other than looking at this stuff.
Yep.
So yes, I think so. The short version of the long story there was, yes, he took the anxieties. What he did was he took the anxieties of that time and showed us how we were really doing something to ourselves much worse.
Yeah.
And that's wow. I mean, that's really what makes that movie into something where I just kind of sit and just, and I'm just kind of breathless at it.
And what's funny is that when you watch the movie now, especially younger listeners right now that don't remember a world where there weren't shopping malls.
Oh my God!
One of the interesting lines
there was
is
such a world once.
Yeah. I mean, it's like nowadays. Not only do you have giant shopping centers, you have smaller shopping centers too. So you just go to the outdoor mall, or
everything in between.
The corner mall, or exactly. You have all shapes and sizes now. But one I can't remember. Is it Roger who says when they first see the shopping center, he goes, "What is that?"
Exactly. My God, he said, well, yeah, who doesn't know what that is?
I mean, it was only 30 years ago, folks. We're not talking 100 years ago.
That's
but,
right.
So he says, "What is it?" And they're like, "Well, it's one of those indoor." I think the line is one of those indoor shopping malls.
Right.
So you're kind of like, huh? But
I've heard of those.
Yeah. It's like, wow, okay. But as you're talking, I'm thinking, wow, this is also 78, right? So we're going through all this really bad time in America's history, of recent history, certainly in the last, economically speaking, of course. But it's a precursor to the 80s. And what was the 80s? It was the me generation. It was greed. Greed is right. Greed works, right? As they say in Wall Street.
Yeah.
And then not too long after that, you have, President Bush saying after 9/11, go out and go shopping.
Yep.
And it's like, wow, man, talk about like predicting the future.
Yes. I mean, in a way, I don't know. I mean, that would be a different interview for you. Would be to ask George directly. But I don't know if he looks. I don't know if he looks at stuff like that and laughs or cries. Because I can't think of any. If you had to predict something awful about the demise of American empire, and you said that we all just, we didn't. I was going to say we fiddled while Rome burnt, but that sounds too artistic almost. We went shopping while Rome burnt. To predict that and then to have it actually happen, I at least would just sort of cry over it.
Yeah.
Like, this is too sad.
Yeah.
So much, and that's really what I feel when, either Roger or Steve dies in the movie. Is like, God, these seem like intelligent, interesting kind of guys. Why did they want to die for this mall full of stuff?
Yeah.
And it's just stuff, and it's funny, the scenes that they show of them with all the stuff, it doesn't really seem like they're enjoying it very much. I mean, I know they need the food and the fuel and the weapons and stuff, but it just seems so frivolous and idiotic. Oh God, the one thing I pointed to in the book that I was actually looking at that passage again, and that I will still bank on as being deliberate. When he shows them in the fur coats.
Yep.
It's like, why would you dress up your characters so that they look like a bunch of pimps?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Unless you were trying to say, God, you guys look ridiculous. God, this is what it was all for. And at that point, Roger's been bitten, so he's dying. So I was like, this is what someone died for, so that you could dress up in mink for no reason, right? You're in a mall, so the place is air conditioned, so there's absolutely no reason for this, other than I don't know what, other than this is where you stupidly and arbitrarily put your value.
Yeah. And it's funny because I remember even when I first watched the movie, you feel like they're out of character when they change into all of this mall clothes.
I think that's an excellent way to put it. That's an excellent way to put it, is the costuming, right?
Yeah.
The costuming is definitely brought out in the Fran scene when she's in front of the mirror.
Yep.
Because that I definitely look at and cringe and think, because I don't know about you, but I just thought Galen Ross was like the hottest thing. Yeah, exactly. Back then, I mean, her and then a couple of years later, Linda Hamilton in Terminator, right? I mean,
of course, yeah.
Fever and Aliens, right? I mean, all these girls with guns. I just love that. And she's dolling herself up there as some kind of I don't know what, but it just looks hideous.
Yeah.
And you're watching her, and then the speaker comes on, "Attention, mall shoppers," and you can just see how disgusted she gets. And at least at that moment, she gets it, right? She gets what is happening and what's wrong with it. Yeah, I think you're right. It's all about costuming. There's also all the different shots of mannequins in that, right? So there's all this sense of like masks and falseness about what they're doing.
Well, and you mentioned too that here there's a scene after they've secured the mall, where Stephen and Fran
in bed
are in bed, and instead of talking or making love or doing something, they're sitting there staring off into the distance, just totally empty.
Yep.
You have this giant mall, and it's not filling that void.
Yes, I mean I think that is the point. It doesn't fulfill anything.
No. And, you drew an interesting parallel between the zombies in Dawn of the Dead and the damned that are portrayed in Dante's Inferno.
Yes.
Why don't you?
And you would like me to tell you about that parallel?
I would.
Yes, I was being coy for a minute. What really made the book click, and what really made me sit down and write it, because I mean, again, I'd seen the Dawn remake, and I was like all energized about zombie movies, but still, when I write something, I like to say something, something that involves some difficulty, some problem that needed to be solved, some puzzle that I needed to kind of answer, some riddle that I need to answer.
Yep.
So something needs to click. In other words, I can't just talk randomly about these things, about what I find interesting. Something has to click, and that particular connection did click because I think at that point I was teaching Dante's Inferno. So I was reading over the poem again, and I saw this line where Virgil tells Dante, as trying to describe where they're going to go now. He's saying we have to go to this terrible pit, and Dante says, "Oh well, but who are these people here?" And Virgil explains, "These are those who have lost the good of intellect, and who made reason slave to appetite." And at that point, I was like, "That's a zombie. They've lost their minds, and they make reason, and they're complete slaves to the appetite, and they no longer reason about things." So finally, everything kind of fell into place at that point, and I realized that Romero's vision of what happens when a zombie bites us and we turn into a zombie, that really is just a modern, secular, take all the God talk out of it, version of Dante's very medieval idea of what it means to be one of the damned in hell. So that was my connection there, and I was thrilled to see it, but in a way I suppose not surprised, because I think ultimately Romero or Dante do have that kind of prophetic tinge to them. I mean Dante in what he sees as a very very corrupt society, he wants to say, guys, we're really doing this wrong. We're really going down the wrong path. And I think that's totally what Romero wants to kind of shake his finger at modern America and say, guys, we've really gone astray here.
The most well-known line in the film, used in some of the posters, everybody knows it. It was used in the remake. "When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth." Certainly for someone who is PhD in religious studies. It's quite a biblical line.
It's biblish, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Like Steve says in the remake, they're dead-ish.
Yeah.
That's biblish.
Yeah.
It of course doesn't exist in the Bible. It's not a biblical line, but it is what we think of when we think of, especially the Book of Revelation, and when we think of apocalyptic. We do think in those terms, and I think it ties for me closely in with the Dante idea. Is that part of the strength of Dante's vision of an afterlife, be it Inferno, Purgatory, or Paradiso, but especially in Inferno, his vision of an afterlife is how shockingly similar it is to regular life. And again, as we've been saying a couple times in this hour, that seems to be Romero's drumbeat, is how things really aren't going to change that much in zombie world. We're gonna keep doing the same. We're gonna keep making the same bad mistakes. We're gonna keep repeating the same bad habits, just ad infinitum, just forever.
Now you mentioned another quote or a takeoff on that, and I'm not sure exactly where you got it. I don't know if you came up with it or if you got it from somewhere. You say that when there's no more room in hell, the dead will shop the earth.
I don't have the book in front of me, so I don't have the bibliography, but that was from an earlier analysis of Romero. And a very waggish and funny one.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Now, you mentioned that this would be the first time where Romero equates humans and zombies. How does he do that?
Well, he has the characters say it explicitly, so it's heavy-handed when Peter just comes out and says it. They're us. But I suppose, in the whole trajectory of the plot of the film, it's zombies take over the mall, people take over the mall, zombies, fight them to take over the mall, zombies are locked outside, other people come in and break into the mall, and then the zombies get into the mall. So, the whole thing is about zombies and people wanting so desperately to get into the mall.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be, you don't see, I suppose termites or something else are trying to get into a building for their own reasons, but zombies and humans are trying to get into the building for the same reason. They want this stuff. And again, the parody and the sick kind of perversion to it is that you can see in the case of the zombies, well, come on, Mr. Zombie, you don't need this stuff, right? You don't eat food anymore. You don't need video games. You don't need clothes. So you don't need this stuff. But the underlying point of the film has been, as you just pointed out, the people don't really need this stuff, or they don't want it really. They think they want it, but it doesn't bring them any. That's the ultimate punchline, right? It doesn't bring them any satisfaction.
Yeah.
So likewise, when the zombies get in, it won't bring them any satisfaction either, but they don't really care because they're zombies.
Yeah.
And that is again where I take the hopefulness of the ending, is that Fran and Peter escape that, and it's better for them that they escape that. I would even go so far as to say, even if 5 minutes after the movie ends, the helicopter crashes and they're either killed in the crash or they're eaten, it's still better than hanging out in the mall and just it's still better than hanging out in the mall and just being bored to death until the inevitable, right?
Yeah, I would say so. But also, too, the makeup that Tom Savini does on the zombies that you note, they don't go out of their way to make them look zombie-ish, I guess. They don't make them look decaying. And even the clothes that a lot of the zombies wear in the film, it's new or it's not falling off. So they do, in essence, other than, a little bit of makeup, they almost do resemble the living.
I think that's fairly deliberate, because in a few scenes they are, the helicopter decapitation or the when they're attacked, when Peter's attacked inside the little building at the airport, the plaid shirt zombie is pretty decayed. So he clearly can do that kind of work and does do it sometimes in the movie. So the fact that the mob scenes, they look fairly, it's kind of pale, right? They're sort of greenish.
Yep.
But I think you're right, and especially because they're still identified as what they were in life. I mean, I'm thinking especially of the one who's identified and she's listed in the credits, and you'll see her at cons. She's identified as Nurse Zombie.
Yep. Yeah.
That's because she's dressed up as a nurse.
Yep.
So she is still her. She is still, what she was.
Yep.
And I suppose, let me make sure this is right for all the movies. I think, yeah, this is right for all the movies. Dawn's the only one where major characters become zombies and we get to see them for a little while.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I guess we do very briefly in Night before Ben shoots Harry and the family. But we do see Steve and Roger as zombies, so this is clearly where even our major characters are headed.
Yeah.
Right? It is all the same, and I suppose especially, I mean, it's sad and revealing, when Roger says, I'll try not to come back.
Yeah.
And, well, of course you'll try not to come back, but you will.
Yeah.
That's what you are. I mean, that's where we're all headed.
I always wondered what it is when you do that transformation, when you die and you become the undead. What happens to your soul, to your mind, when you make that transformation into a zombie, like when Roger does and when Steven does?
Yep.
Like, what is going on in their mind? Now, obviously, you would say, well, of course they don't have a mind. They're dead.
Yeah.
But obviously, they have some sort of motor skills. The brain is working in some format, and I'm glad that Romero never gets into that. You never get into the technicalities of why zombies are zombies. No. You never have the scientist that goes, well, here's what we've learned. It's great that it's left ambiguous, because it does make you think. Like, when Roger says he's going to try not to come back, what happens during that time when he dies and then becomes a zombie? Does he look at Peter and say, that's my friend? Is he thinking, God, I hope he pulls that trigger? Yeah, it's very interesting. Certainly, and again, it comes back to the whole idea of how do you kill a family member that's turned? How do you kill your friend that's turned? And it does bring up those moral questions.
Yeah, yeah. And I do think that is something where the written word does have a bit of an advantage, or at least can go in different directions than the film, because a lot of books do take it from the zombies' perspective and talk some about their limited intelligence and memory and what this would mean for them to retain something of their previous life. And again, as I say, we all have to pay homage to Romero. I think he leaves that, he points you in that direction with Bub in Day of the Dead.
In Day,
right?
yeah.
Because Bub clearly remembers all kinds of things.
Sure.
And so something's going on there. It's in other words, and it's funny because one of the scientists in Dawn actually says, just shoot them in the head, set them on fire. Got to be done with them. They're just animated flesh.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, not exactly. They retain something of humanity.
Yeah.
Would that they were only animated flesh, because then we could kill them much easier, and they wouldn't represent as much of a threat either. I mean, Steve leads them back to the hiding place because he remembers where it is.
Yep.
In Dawn. So, again, there is that. What makes them more terrifying and dangerous and problematic is that they're still human. In other words, again, you can watch Sci-Fi Channel several times a night to see movies about people being attacked by whatever, ticks or fleas or aliens or rocks or whatever comes to life and attacks them. But the fact that you're being attacked by something that is still in some way human adds an extra dimension to it.
And it's like what we talked about in the last previous podcast, where, werewolves, vampires, all kinds of monsters, this is what you mentioned in your book. It is easier to kill them because it's them with a capital T, and also because they don't have the human qualities or human characteristics that zombies have. They are superhuman. And with zombies, it does become an issue. Whereas with vampires, you're trying to, rid them, out of the town or the city or wherever it is that they are. Zombies, little different, because it is your mom, it's your dad, it's your brother, it's your sister, it's your friend.
At some level, it is. At some level, it is. And again, at some level, we are afraid of those. We're afraid of anyone when they pass. to the next place, wherever it is. You know, we're afraid for them, right?
Yeah.
That they've gone somewhere bad, or that they are suffering or something. But we're also afraid of the effect it has on us.
Yeah. You mentioned the one scene where Peter is non-heroic, or maybe even himself non-human, when the guys find out from Stephen that Fran is pregnant, and she's been pregnant for a few months. And she's still smoking, and she's still drinking, by the way.
I hadn't thought of the 70s, we weren't. Yeah.
The good old days, right?
Right.
But there is a discussion that the men have while Fran is sitting in the other room, listening to them, smoking her cigarette, that Peter says, "Do you want it? I can do the abortion." And you have this talk of abortion. Not even so much. Let's not even discuss the whole idea about, it's the men making the decision for the woman.
Yeah.
It's the idea that humanity is going down, and yet you have, instead of celebrating a birth of a child to keep humanity going, you're talking about getting rid of it.
Yeah, it's a bizarre scene, and I don't even remember seeing it in the theater, though I assume I must have. But I remember on the DVD, I was like, huh? And mostly because it's out of character for Peter, I think.
Yeah.
And if I were going to shoot the thing, I would probably say, no, that really doesn't belong in there. But if you were to argue that it belongs in there, I suppose it would be to show some development in his character.
Yeah.
But I suppose the overall thing, perhaps where it does fit the film, is that people are still clinging on to the pre-zombie world. And the values or disvalues or wrong values of that world. Now, I don't mean to suggest that I would never suggest that Dawn of the Dead is pro-life or anti-abortion or something like that.
Sure, yeah.
It is anti-abortion in that context. That this is a horrific, monstrous thing to suggest.
Yeah.
Doing, both for the reason you say, the general reason of, gee, we really probably shouldn't be killing any more potential humans because there are few enough of them left, and because it's like, well, we're just going to discuss this amongst ourselves and forget the person who's most intimately involved with it. But the whole discussion does seem to be as though it was going on in a pre-zombie world.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, do you want this? We can take care of this. Is this an inconvenience for you? When that doesn't fit with the situation at all.
As much as Night deals with racism, Dawn really kind of touches on it just a little bit, and sexism as well. One of the interesting scenes that I just recently discovered, I went back and watched the European version of Dawn of the Dead, which is a shorter version, and it's cut differently. But there are a couple of scenes that are in that are not in the original, and I don't know if it's in the extended. I haven't seen that one yet, but maybe some of the listeners out there have seen it. But the scene in the helicopter when our four heroes are first getting away in the helicopter, there's a moment where I believe it's Peter asks the group, "Are you leaving anyone behind?" And Fran responds by saying, "An ex-husband." And Roger says an ex-wife. And then they cut to Peter, and he responds as he looks out the window. They ask him, and Peter says, "Some brothers," which is really, talk about, a play on words. But I found that very interesting scene. I was like, wow, I'm curious why that wasn't kept in the original version. But getting into sexism, we talked about how it is the interracial couple, as we call it. They weren't a couple in the movie, but Fran and Peter get away. You talk about in your book, Gospel of the Living Dead, that Peter really earns a respect for Fran very, very quickly.
Yeah, he does. You're right. Immediately upon that suggested abortion scene,
Yeah.
he does I don't know if he respects her, but he immediately. So I was just hesitating to use the word earn, but he immediately shows that he respects her more than the other men do. I mean, I don't think Roger ever speaks a word to her. You'd have to check, but.
Yeah, that is interesting.
They seem to have the most minimal contact between those two.
Yeah.
And actually, no, I think I did read. No, I did read that in one analysis. They are the two most diametrically opposed characters.
Yeah.
Fran is the intuitive, feeling, more compassionate character. Roger as the more masculine, man of action, violent character. So they have the least interaction. At any rate, immediately Peter shows some sympathy to her. I don't want to say oppressed. That's a little strong, but her subservient, perhaps. Mm-hmm. Her subservient position of being told what to do, of being told what the plan is, of being told, okay, we're going to take care of things.
Mm-hmm.
When she rebels or objects to that, he immediately supports her and says, yes, she should learn to shoot.
Yeah.
She should learn to fly the helicopter. Her voice, she should have a vote in what we do.
Which is the scene that comes right after the talk of the abortion. So
it's
very fast.
I think it. As I say, I mean, it does almost seem too jarring to be in that way. But the way the trajectory of the movie seems to be is that he, as a black man, arguably, probably not arguably at that point, but demonstrably at that point in American history, not having his opinion taken seriously amongst other people, and she as a woman in their fictional group not having her opinion taken seriously, and really in society not having her position taken seriously. They do bond, but never, as has been pointed out in many of the analyses, never in any romantic way that I can even think is even hinted at, even with the barest of like glances or anything.
Yeah.
It seems like, they seem very chaste, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, they really don't seem to have anything, any interest in that direction. But he immediately seems to value her, and that, in terms of the plot, determines the ending, really. Because I mean, if she didn't know how to fly the helicopter, nothing would happen at the end.
Yeah, that would be it. Yeah.
Right. I mean, something would happen with them dying, whether it was eaten or suicide, but something would happen. Now, we did talk about the alternate ending.
Yeah. Yes.
I should mention.
Yes. Let's talk about the alternate. Now, I know the one ending where Peter was supposed to kill himself.
Yes. That was, as far as I can tell, that was hotly debated for years between Savini and Romero as to whether that really happened.
Okay.
Now, whether that really happened in the sense that we all knew it was they knew it was in the original script. So the original script was supposed to be that he killed himself and she killed herself. Now, what's interesting then is the manner.
Uh-huh.
Because in the original script, she was supposed to kill herself with the blades of the helicopter. A particularly strange way to do it.
Okay. Especially
because I got so many guns sitting around, but she was supposed to kill herself with the blades of the helicopter, stepping up into it the way the zombie did earlier. Now, the debate then was between Savini and Romero for years as to whether they had actually shot this and rejected it as not working, working visually, not narratively, but whether this had been driven by purely technical means. And Savini had sworn, we made the dummy. We went through all the things. We shot the thing, and it just didn't look right.
Mm-hmm.
And Romero said, no, I rejected it before we got to that point. Now, I'm told recently a clip has emerged, has been found somewhere by somebody, of the dummy.
Really?
Of the squib-filled dummy, and Savini and his crew hoisting it up on a cable, on a hoist, on a harness, to pull it up into the blades. So Savini's version of it seems to now be confirmed, that they'd actually gotten as far as filming, not just in the script, but actually had gotten as far as filming the original version before they decided it looked bad.
Yeah.
And then coming up with this version that now everyone agrees is the right one in a way. Is the one that we remember and that we want it to happen.
I'm wondering, and I don't know if this could ever be confirmed. I'm wondering, could it have been possible that Savini and his crew shot it as a second unit, maybe Romero doesn't remember it because he might not have been there.
Not been on the
I'm curious. Because he was the producer as well. I can't imagine that would have happened without him knowing it. So, but who knows? Things happen.
20 years after the fact,
And he had enough on his plate.
Again, it's one of these funny things, right? I don't think anybody realizes when they're doing these things that they're making history and that somebody's going to ask them about the details of it. They're just
trying to get a movie done. Yeah.
Going out afterwards and drinking.
Yeah. and let me tell you something. When you're shooting all nights, it's not fun. It's not fun.
Right. It's right. No, it's not about fun or the art. It's about doing a job.
Going to bed at 8 in the morning and getting up at 3 in the afternoon, not fun.
Well, especially for that. Yeah, right. For their time frame. Yeah. Shooting all night. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay. I'm convinced that we are not meant to be awake.
Be nocturnal
at night. Yeah. It's just no matter how hard you try, it's just like it's not meant to happen. Now, speaking of relationships, we have to cover before I let you go, Kim, and I say that sadly. We have to talk about the relationship between Peter and Roger, because this is a relationship that develops very quickly. You talk about when we first see Peter, he helps take out. I just totally forgot the cop's name. Wooly goes, going crazy and blowing.
Psycho cop.
Just on his racial tirade, and Roger's trying to stop him, and Peter comes to the rescue, so to speak, and kills Wooly, and then they meet later on in the basement, and it's a very quick dialogue, and that's one of the things that you do note in your book is the dialogue is very real because you have these two strangers. Just forgetting everything else, but you have two strangers that are meeting, and they're kind of feeling each other out a little bit, and it happens very, very quickly. And you talk about how they really bond quickly, and although it's never discussed again, talking about racial angle in this film, which it doesn't do what Night does. You have a white guy and a black guy who are best friends very quickly, and it's never ever mentioned.
Yeah, I don't know the realism of it, and I suppose the whole thing is telescoped a lot, to make it fit the narrative needs of the film. That everything happens quickly.
Yeah.
But I think the implication is that they see things the same way. They were. I suppose. Okay. I can flash forward to the rest of the film and then project backwards. They work well together.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be the implication and the fact throughout their relationship and throughout their working in the mall. Everything they function very well as a team.
Yeah. Now,
I take it that is what they pick up on immediately in the basement there, in a scene in which, of course, no one is functioning well as a team. Everything's falling apart, and yet they seem. Here's the typical macho phrase for it, right? They have each other's back, right?
Yep.
I think that's what it comes down to. I can count on you.
Yep.
You can count on me. We can get through this. Now, again, what the emotional content of that is, I don't know, but it seems to be an immediate bond in terms of compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
How about that? Rather than just liking someone, it's seeing, I can work well with this person. Much stronger than partner,
Sure.
Although I suppose, partner works in a cop movie, right? This is my partner.
Yeah. And actually, if I'm remembering correctly, you mentioned Lethal Weapon.
Yeah.
And
in other words, oddly enough, I sort of buy this relationship better than the Lethal Weapon one. That one seems so gratuitous.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna make a black-white buddy movie because that's kind of safe and funny, and
mm-hmm.
people like that. Or God knows what's the one that's after that with Jackie Chan?
Oh yeah, Rush Hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, wow,
Chris Tucker.
How gratuitous would you have to be at that point? To just This just seems to be two cops who work well together, and immediately clicks that maybe we could shoot our way out of this mess.
And they share a moment early in that film where right after when they talk and they see and they talk with the priest, they have to kill the zombies
Thank you.
that are in the room. And I never really noticed. I'm sorry. But I never really noticed it, and it could have been the other prints that I had seen prior, or the video, or whatever. But again, when I watched the European version, I noticed Peter crying when he was doing it, and then when he runs out of bullets, it's Roger who comes in and helps finish the job.
Yeah. I didn't necessarily remember the bullet running out part, but I do remember Peter as being the more emotionally distraught over the whole scene.
Yeah.
And that is, you're right. I mean, you're talking about, is it okay to kill zombies? That scene seems to make it pretty clear that it's okay in some abstract sense. It's certainly okay from the zombies' perspective. They don't care. But it's not okay from our perspective. If we have any sense of humanity left, this is going to make us very distraught. I would contrast that with the kind of gleeful, cackling killing that you get in either Day or Land, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just blowing into town and just shooting everybody in the head the way they do in Land, that is perverse, right? I mean, and it doesn't matter that these are meat puppets, right? And that you're not really doing anything wrong according to that theory.
Mm-hmm.
You are, from your perspective, I mean, it's the exact same thing. Is it okay to? This was actually an argument frequently put forth by ethicists in the 19th century. Is it okay to torture animals, or beat them? Well, they're just animals, so it's not really doing them any harm. Went the theory, but you still shouldn't do it because it's doing some irreparable and horrible harm to you, to show that kind of sadism and that kind of cruelty, regardless of the object of it.
Yeah.
So even if a zombie were just animated meat, it's something monstrous about you to go around enjoying it, or to be able to do it without being moved somehow. So yes, thank you for reminding me of that scene is kind of a precursor.
Yeah.
In the movies to that whole having some emotion during this horrible act.
Kim Paffenroth is the author of the book Gospel of the Living Dead, and unfortunately our conversation has to end at Dawn of the Dead, my friends. I wish I could talk about the other films, but I think we're going to save that for another show. And I am inviting Kim back in the future. We will have him back. We will discuss Day and Land and the remake of Dawn. If you have not gotten the book, Kim, can you tell our listeners out there where can they get this book?
Absolutely. Of course, you can get it on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com. But even if you're still at the low-tech version of things and you're like physically going into a store, Borders and Barnes & Noble almost every store should have a copy. I emphasize a copy. It will have one copy sitting on the shelf in the film criticism section, because that's how many they've ordered. But you will see it there, and you can look through it and see if it's something you'd like to have, and I hope you do.
And Kim, if people want to follow your website, if they want to email you, where can they find you online?
If you took the acronym for Gospel of the Living Dead, so that's GOTLD.blogspot.com. That's my blog. I'll post there most every day. Different random rants, sometimes about zombies, sometimes about horror, sometimes about politics, sometimes about movies, but different stuff. And I'd love to have you stop by and leave a comment.
I most certainly will. And last but not least, is there anything that you're working on for the future?
I got bitten by the bug of wanting to write my own fiction, or not so much as, again, much like the zombies, it was resuscitated. I used to write fiction constantly, every day. I used to write it all the time in junior high and high school. And then I went to college and I just stopped. Just couldn't write it for some reason. Just started reading these other books and thinking about things and getting, I hope, better ideas. And then when I got back into the zombie stuff, I thought, it's fun to look at Romero's zombies and talk about his, but I could start making my own stories, and I could put zombies in them and make them do what I want, and make them mean and symbolize the things that I'm interested in. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. So if you check out my fiction, I've written several books with a little press called Permuted Press.
Okay.
Check my novel Dying to Live. The sequel is Dying to Live, Life Sentence. And I've edited a couple anthologies too.
Now, before I let you go, I do have one other question. Since your book, Gospel of the Living Dead, certainly we talked about Diary of the Dead, and Romero will be coming out with his newest zombie film later this year, which I believe right now is titled Of the Dead, and it takes place on an island. Between those films and 28 Weeks Later, because I know you mentioned 28 Days Later in your first, I say your first book, but in Gospel you mentioned 28 Days Later. I'm curious, is there any chance that maybe you will revisit Romero down the road?
I would love to. I've done some essay versions of the book, but I would love to have a revised edition that takes account of his newer films. As always, that's up to the market and the publisher. But realistically, I would think in a few years that could easily happen, and I would very much welcome that.
Well, I got to tell you, I welcome it too, because the book is fantastic. All my listeners out there, if you are a zombie fan, and if you love Romero's films, and even if you don't, if you want to read good film criticism, Gospel of the Living Dead is the way to go. I don't say that because Kim is here. I say that because I really believe it. It's a great book. And, what we've talked about is stuff that's written in Kim's book. And like I said, we'll have Kim back later on down the road, and we'll talk about Day and Land and all kinds of great zombie stuff. Kim Paffenroth is the author. Gospel of the Living Dead is the book. Kim, thank you so much for taking this time to join me in the graveyard.
No, thank you. And as I say, it's not about agreeing with me. It's about just renewing your interest and getting some other understanding of the films. And as you say, even if you don't like these films, it's maybe convincing you that you should give them another look.
Well, thank you for being here, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thanks so much. See you later.
Wow. That's all I can say. Wow. As I put this interview to rest, I would like to send a large thank you to Kim Paffenroth for taking the time to spend a few hours with me on the phone to discuss his book and to talk about zombies. It was really, really awesome. Okay, well, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Kim regarding Night and Dawn of the Dead. Don't worry, friends. Part 3 is right around the corner, where we will discuss Day of the Dead and Land of the Dead. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with me, the email address is gyspodcast@gmail.com. That's G as in grave, Y as in yard, S as in show, gyspodcast@gmail.com. And always look forward to getting emails from you, suggestions, thoughts, criticisms, whatever. You can find the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, pretty much everywhere. So obviously you found it because you're listening to it right now. And as I mentioned in the previous show, I am considering doing some new original interviews. I just have to kind of figure it out. So I'm slowly but surely putting a plan together. I'm in no hurry, but I can't do it on the schedule that I did it originally back in 09 and 10, where it was every week. It's a lot, and I want to do it, and I want to do it right. So I will make that announcement once it happens, as well as announce any social media presence as well. Right now, it's just the email address because, well, I'm not in a hurry. But I always look forward to hearing from you on the emails. And again, leave your comments on YouTube and anywhere else you can leave comments regarding the podcast. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, 1 star, 10 stars, 5 stars, whatever it is. It's welcome. All right. It's time to get going here, my friends. So if you know anyone that's a fan of horror, please be sure to pass along my information. Tell them to come on into the graveyard. New listeners and friends are always welcome. And as I always like to remind you, as you exit the graveyard, I would like to remind you to please lock the gate behind you. We wouldn't want anyone to get out. Until next time.